Agwinush Korja, it's Misha Paula Kunigon. It's my pleasure to welcome you back to the first day of IST-Africa 2022. We're now in the afternoon session following a very interesting plenary session by Happy on cyber infrastructure. So this session is focused on cybersecurity. And we've got a number of interesting presentations from Kenya, from Zimbabwe, from South Africa, and from Namibia addressing different aspects. So I'm going to start with the first presentation, which is on a smart contract approach to cyber threat intelligence sharing in Kenya.
Good evening. My name is Wilson Mugai Maina. I'm the presenter for this paper titled A Smart Contract Approach to Cyber Threat Intelligence Sharing in Kenya. This paper has been co-authored by Dr. Lawrence Leru and Dr. Tobias Malili. All of us are from the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technologies, which is in Kenya. So the motivation of the problem area. The current practice of sharing intelligence in Kenya, we have realized is very informal. This was after an attack was replicated, more specifically the ATM jackpotting attack, where an ATM vulnerabilities are exploited and where the dispensing machine is able to dispense cash illegally, or as a result of this malware, this vulnerability being exploited by a malware. So the other problem is locally manufactured and re-engineered malware has been on the rise. You realize that majority of financial institutions, the reason I'm referencing financial institutions so much is one hacker, Kevin Mitnick, was asked why he goes after banks. He said that's where the money is. So a lot of attacks, even in our market and research as referenced in my paper, is documented around financial institutions. So locally manufactured malware has been on the rise, and this have ability to bypass the traditional firewalls and anti-malware solutions. We realize that majority of these solutions depend on signatures. So by the time the proprietor of these solutions are able to obtain these signatures, there's a lag time. So hackers or threat analysts and threat actors are able to exploit this lag. So financial institutions are also competitors, and they have a huge reputation to protect. So whenever a reputation of a financial institution is at risk, you realize that there is a lot of cash out which threaten even the survival of that institution. So as a result of these factors, cyber threats have been replicated among institutions in Kenya. Yeah, financial institutions don't share information, as we all know. So especially in this market. So the research objectives is to investigate the mechanisms of exchange, especially the current mechanisms in the financial institutions. And then the research proposes after that proposes a smart contract-based architecture for cyber threat intelligence sharing. And also we propose a model of hiding the identity of participating devices using encryption and verifiable random function. We'll see how we'll see more of this as we proceed. So the current mechanism of exchange is simple alerts where, as we mentioned earlier, people send text, call, and this is heavily reliant on a personal network. So so the information, cyber threat intelligence might not flow along the industry. And if Bankia is attacked, most likely the lag time can be able to allow a threat actor to attack as many banks as possible, because it has been proven it has worked. So that is the gap we want to fill. So there are also detailed reports. These are mostly these proprietary companies where they provide reports, but the limitation of this is that there is no standard. The report is based on that individual, And to top on that is that these companies also are in business, so they require a subscription fee, which is normally paid monthly, which is a high amount. So there are also secure online portals. These have been adapted mostly by the SACs. So you find that as financial institution, we are the givers of information, but when the information does not come back, so it's skewed towards giving and not receiving. And when it comes back, it comes in form of summaries, and there is no actionable intelligence. So it is not very useful. And the last mechanism is the machine readable mechanism of exchange. These are where the solutions are able to interchange and speak. For instance, the intrusion detection solution can be able to talk to a report-based solution. So the challenge with this, there are so many solutions, there are so many standards are researched by the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, which has been referenced on my research, on our research, indicated that there are over 53 different information at the time of their research. So it's really hard to get everyone on board on a single standard, on a single solution, which is virtually impossible. So that's the reason why we conducted a research, interviewing and getting responses from these financial institutions. What do they want? What do we want to be able to cover this cyber intelligence sharing issue? So we did, at the time of our research, there were 43 licensed banks in Kenya and mortgage finance institutions. 39 of them were operational. So we did research on mixed method, whereby we adapted both quantitative and qualitative method just to be able to cover every ground. So we preferred snowball sampling because you realize, as we mentioned earlier, banks are leveraged on privacy. So get a friend to get a sample, a person who can be able to give us information. So the research has a 5% error rate and 95% confidence level. So we used 5-point Likert, and also we adapted open-ended question and answer. So that we be able to get all these ideas, so that we can be able to move better. So the results are as follows. The major factor that came out was cost consideration. From the survey, majority felt that cost is a factor to consider when adapting technology. So there's user privacy, which 88% agreed that they have a great concern with regards to privacy. They only want to be known that they are the ones who share that information. And the response time, we are in the information age. People want information as quick as possible. So 88% felt that response time is a key factor. And also the other factor is intelligence sources. Majority of people said we do not limit ourselves to just sharing among the industry information that has happened within the industry. We want to accommodate every actionable intelligence to this platform. So that is where we landed to Ethereum. Ethereum is, and the choice of Ethereum is as follows. It's the largest public blockchain. That's a good thing. It also employs, it's open source, which caters the cost implication. It is distributed, meaning it can cover everyone in the industry. And also it has a smart contract functionality where we are able to define, we want this intelligence to be shared and to make it actionable depending on the format that you give it. So Ethereum was favored due to those reasons. And as you can see in the previous slide, there's cost, it's open source, privacy, it uses pseudonyms, but our research further revealed some gaps which will respond and simulate. Then response time, Ethereum is really fast, and also it can accommodate the intelligence sources. So I'll move on to the gap that we identified in blockchain is with regards to the device identity. Okay, Reid and Regan observed that it is difficult to obtain the anonymity of network devices as public announced addresses. Ethereum uses pseudonyms that are attached to Ethereum accounts. So yes, pseudonymity is not anonymity, meaning the address, yes, is a pseudonym. It's a public address that has been encrypted, but there is another network layer that has additional information. What's your IP? What's your IP? What's your device ID? So this other information can be obtained as you are passing information to the blockchain. So that's the gap that we identified, and we are seeking to provide a solution to that. So Reid and Hagen had suggested the use of Tor browser, but Bikov said that if you use Tor browser, there's an element of man in the middle attack where you can be able to fingerprint all the users and learn their IP addresses. So Tor is not the solution. Zing also came with the conclusion that blockchain offered pseudonymity, but does not offer unlinkability. Meaning, if people use these public addresses, you are able to find other information about them so that you can be able to trace back to the original user. And Beres also revealed that yes, the wallet providers who provide wallet to the users, they have much more information about you, including the IP addresses, your phone, your carrier, so they can be able to know about you. So we came up with a model which is utilizing Remix IDE, which has been powered by JavaScript and React.js. There's MetaMaps to connect to the blockchain network. We used Raspen text networks and Kovan just to make sure that the results are the same. And also we utilize the Chainlink network, which provided us with a verifiable random function. So we had 3 contracts: registration, update, and notification. Allow me to go to the next slide. Registration, as the contracts are listed, there's the registration. So we deployed this on simulation on the test networks. So on registration, we deployed the contract. It costed $38 and it took 27 seconds. So, and then the registration, the function registration, when you call it, it will consume $0.22 and it will take 59 seconds. The reason for the time is because you are calling the verifiable random function oracles, whereby the device ID that is collected on a device when a person is registering a device, it goes and exchanges that device ID with a random function, so that the network layer information is also encrypted along with the pseudonym for the Ethereum account. So we also had these other contracts, and you can see the time is good and also the cost is good. So the business benefits for this is user privacy. As we have demonstrated, we are able to encrypt the device ID or RFID depending on the device you are using, so that this network information about you is also taken care of, so that there is no linkability. The response time, the average time is 45 seconds. The cost, it's really low. The average cost to deploy $45, $0.45, and 0.14 to call a function. So you can see the cost aspect has been taken care of. But also the business benefit is intelligence sources. You can be able to accommodate various actionable intelligence sources, the internal, external, because you use the CVE standard to use that, which was one of the requests from the survey results we did. So on the conclusion, this research has provided a novel approach to curbing the issue of income linkages, due to the fact that you can be able to share intelligence within an industry anonymously, quickly, cheaply, and institutions, if they adopt this technology, they'll be able to curb the issue of replication. Also, the research has proved that we are able to encrypt the network layer information by encrypting the device ID and the RFIDs, which was a major consideration for the people who are interviewed. And we suggest for future works for people to look at the analytical aspect of this. How can this intelligence be analyzed to provide a score? For instance, highly actionable intelligence or lowly actionable intelligence. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Wilson. So can you talk to us briefly about the challenges of adoption of this? Because a lot of the ways in which financial institutions work currently is based on identifying that you're associated with a certain device. You know, two-factor encryption and things like that and authentication are based on these principles. So how do you see this being operationalized in practice?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So in adoption, I think the greatest advantage in Kenya is that financial institutions normally have an association. So the quickest win is to engage the Kenya Bankers Association, and we have already engaged them, and we are getting positive response. If they are able to partake or to buy the idea, it can be cascaded very easily to the rest of the financial institutions. And also, not only banks, we are now looking at SACCOs. We have an umbrella body called Cusco, and also we have started engaging on how they can also participate or buy in. So yes, and also individual banks, so that we can get the buy-in of the industry, we are also engaging individual banks and circles so that they can be aware of what we are trying to achieve. Thank you, Paul.
My pleasure. Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Wilson? Please share them in chat and then I'll call on you. Wilson, you're in the clear. Thank you very much indeed. So our next presentation is towards a new taxonomy of insider threats.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sarathiel Chaipa. I'm a cybersecurity researcher and also a doctoral student with the University of South Africa. My co-authors on this research are Professor IST-Africa and Professor Shoren Paul with the University of South Africa. The title of my presentation is Towards a New Taxonomy for Insider Threat. The outline of my presentation is as follows. We'll look at the motivation and the problem area. We'll then go on to look at the objectives. We'll look at the research approach. Then we'll focus on the major outcomes of this particular research. And then we'll look at the conclusion and the recommendations from this particular research. Why this particular research? The cybersecurity domain is rife with cases of insider threat. Insiders being users that have got authorized access to information systems, to networks, to sensitive data because they work within the organization. But however, some of these users go on to then abuse that access for their personal reasons. There is support to this assertion. There is a report that was done by the United States Cybersecurity Survey in 2018, indicating that 25% of the attacks were actually attributed to insiders. And the current report by Thembakazi Institute indicates that 50% of the attacks from the survey that they did were actually attributed to insider threat agents. There are published cases that we know of that are quite prominent, the case of Snowden, the case of Maina, the case of Raeesa, amongst others. So this research wants to focus on insider threat taxonomies. You know, the taxonomies actually categorize these insiders into different categories and be able to then stipulate characteristics for each of those categories. So the research gap that we identified is that most of the research to date is actually researched on individual taxonomies, or they've published individual taxonomies. Now, what we're doing is we're taking these individual taxonomies, combining them to see if we can produce a new taxonomy, which is a taxonomy combination from those that have been already researched. We have two objectives. The first one was actually looking at the plausibility of combining taxonomies. Like I've indicated that these generally have always been published as individual taxonomies or utilized as individual taxonomies. Then the second aspect, we are exploring, the sophistication, along this new taxonomy tree or the taxonomy that we've produced, the transition or we will try and profile an insider threat as we move along the taxonomy tree that we have produced. In terms of this research, we used a systematic literature review to identify the taxonomies that we eventually utilized. We identified 7 of them, and then we did an in-depth study on each of these taxonomies, focusing on the characteristics of each of the categories, and then we looked at the similarities across the taxonomies and the differences across the taxonomies. And then after that, those that were identified unique, we then explored, the option of combining them. And then this combination that we did the trial, we saw that we were producing meaningful results, hence this particular research. And then from there, we built a new taxonomy, or the taxonomy tree, which we have been seeing. The 5 that we eventually used to build the taxonomy, the new taxonomy or the taxonomy tree, are the Anderson taxonomy, Behardien taxonomy, Shaw and Fisher taxonomy, the Cole and Ring taxonomy, and the Newman taxonomy. Those that were eliminated are 2. McLaren's at final, we found that it was too general, so we eliminated it. And then the Salem and Hedgepop and Stoff in 2008, we noted that the category that they identified are actually found within the Anderson and the Hayden, and the characteristics are exactly the same. So we eliminated that taxonomy and remained with 5. From those 5 taxonomies, we then combined them. What you see now is a taxonomy tree that we produced. We ranked these in terms of how, when they were published, starting with the Anderson that was published in 1980 and ending with the Newman one, which was published in 2010. So you will notice that the Newman taxonomy has got logically present, logically absent, physically present, and physically absent. And then at the top, we're having a masquerader, we're having a malfeasor, we're having a clandestine. So what we are saying in this taxonomy tree or this taxonomy combination, we are saying we can profile a threat agent as they traverse or as they change their characteristics along this taxonomy tree. We're able to map how they actually change it. For example, someone who has been a masquerader that is stealing credentials and pretending to be someone else whom they are not. They can then, with time, they can then become also a traitor. So they are adding now the characteristics of a masquerader and those of a traitor. And then from there, they can become an avenger within the Shaw and Fisher, or they could become a hacker within the Shaw and Fisher. And then they could also then become an inside associate. They are now associating with a person who's working in a particular organization with the intention of actually trying to access information in a particular organization. Or they can become a pure insider. They can go also into work in a particular organization and then be able to utilize the characteristics of a pure insider, which means that access that they actually have got. And then they can become logically present. They're actually now within the network and being utilized, their presence within the network for their other reasons other than what they employed to do. So let's look at maybe an example. If we combine the Anderson taxonomy and the Hayden taxonomy, then we take from the Anderson taxonomy, we're taking a masquerader who then, after being a masquerader maybe for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or years, they then attain, the attributes of a traitor. As we are aware that a masquerader is someone who is utilizing someone else's credentials, and so they're pretending to be whom they are not. Then they are joining this with the traitor characteristics, which means they're now utilizing these the information that they've actually stolen to also steal information, which they can then go and use, for monetary purposes, or if it's intellectual property, they can go out and sell that information for monetary gain. or they could actually use that information against the organization in the event that probably they actually fired. They can then utilize that information against the organization. We could also have someone who's a masquerader and also becoming a zealot. We know that a zealot is someone who is trying to prove unethically, the lack of certain functionality or the insufficiency of security within a particular system. So what they're doing is they actually now utilize someone else's credentials to prove that a particular system in the organization they work is malfunctioning or is inadequate. But in the event of anything going wrong, the blame is not actually attributed to them, but to the person who owns those credentials that they actually utilize to store the information. We could actually do a three taxonomy combination, combining Anderson, Hare, and Shaw and Fish. So we're having someone who is a masquerader, so they already have a masquerading skills, and then they also have now new skills of traitor skills, and then they also become a hacker. So if they are within an organization, they are stealing a colleague's credentials, which they are using to access the system and to steal information within the system. Or they can actually use those credentials to hack into another system in the organization where they don't have, or they are not supposed to have access to, and then steal information from that particular system for monetary purposes, for whatever benefit they want. So we are now saying, the threat agent is not a masquerader, and that's their signature. But they are adding, to their skills, they are adding certain characteristics to their signature. So being a masquerading traitor and also becoming a hacker. And then, they continue on to change into other categories. Like I've indicated, this can actually happen over a period of time. So there is a profile that this threat agent is actually creating over the years. Hence, it's important for the organization to be able to profile this individual over the period and see how they are changing, and then be able to then arm themselves and protect the organization. The benefits for this research, one, to the business community, and also to other organizations. Any organization that has got sensitive information can utilize this knowledge for the purposes of protecting their information. Cybersecurity development organizations, those that develop tools to protect information against cybersecurity, can actually utilize as well this information in terms of developing their tools. And then also cybersecurity researchers, the information that we have actually researched is adding onto the body of knowledge in cybersecurity or in information security defense, so that organizations can make sure that they're protecting their information. And then the benefits to the organization is enhance the countermeasures. Now that they know this guy or this threat agent can transform from one category to another, they are able now to profile this threat agent. Once you have profiled, you can profile them, be able to enhance your countermeasures. You can also enhance the insider threat, analytic tools. Those tools that are being developed for us to protect our information. We can then enhance those tools using the information that we have, using the profiling skills that we've generated from these taxonomy combinations. And then in terms of the conclusion, what we have actually proved is to an extent that we can actually combine taxonomies to form a new taxonomy, and that becomes useful in terms of us defending sensitive information against threat agents. This we've also noticed that these threat agents, the reason why they're actually changing or adding these characteristics is for them to avoid detection. So in a way, as they are changing, they are becoming more sophisticated. They are also becoming more threatening to the organization, and they are trying to enhance their skills of ensuring that they can successfully attack a system and be able to come up with information. As a recommendation, organizations can utilize this knowledge to enhance their defensive tactics, techniques, and procedures. And then, in terms of further research, we intend to explore the implications of taxonomy combinations on kill chains and also on the MITRE attack framework. And then the other aspect subject to research is to be able to validate these taxonomy combinations or this new taxonomy tree that we've produced against published information on insider threat. what we want to do is we want to take one prominent insider threat agent that is published. We want to see which category did they start from, and along their lifespan within the organization, how have they been changing, how have they been transforming, to an extent that we are trying now to profile them along the taxonomy tree that we have produced. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. I encourage you to then pose me questions, which I can then respond to. Thank you, and we really appreciate your listening to this particular presentation.
Thanks, Sarathiel. I think this is a very interesting area of study. So can you talk us through some of the potential unintended or unanticipated consequences of combining 2 or 3 insider threat taxonomies? And those could either be positive or negative. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. What we have basically noticed is that one of the key things about insider threat agents, because they are within an organization, they are trying by any means to ensure that on the one front, they are showing that they are a loyal employee to the organization, and behind the scenes, they are trying to then be able to steal information from the organization that they're actually working for. So the unintended consequences are that, whilst you've got this guy who's pretending to be an honest guy and working for the organization, in this particular case already, the guy is becoming a masquerade, but he can actually steal information from other colleagues or credentials from other colleagues and then be able to use them against the organization. On the positive note, it is that once we are able to, we're able to profile these guys over as they are changing from maybe one category to another, then it alerts us in terms of how we are actually monitoring the internal employees of an organization, so that whatever tools we're trying to deploy, we're able to then pick up and profile them and then be able to at least pick them at the earliest convenience in order to protect the organization's information. Thank you for that.
I understand. I think one of the challenges is that how successful that will be will depend to a considerable degree on the organizational culture. If there's a high level of trust, then it may take longer, but the organization is more functional. If there's a high level of distrust of employees, then you could potentially get false positives. And yes, admittedly, you may catch potentially bad actors faster. But again, organizational culture is damaged as a result. Do you have any comment?
Yes, I totally agree with you. I think we've seen now, I think there's this zero trust culture in certain organizations where we don't trust literally anyone that is coming into the organization. Hence, we've got to try and ensure that we're actually profiling every employee of the organization. Definitely where there's a high trust culture, it's going to be definitely a challenge, but over a period of time, I think organizations will begin then to notice as these employees are coming in, and probably at the end of the day, they realize that I think they've lost quite substantial information. For example, if it's intellectual property, or it could be certain bills of materials or certain R&D information, which then gets out there and then be utilized, or you find it on the dark web being used by other people. So eventually, I think organizations slowly will have to move on to or back to a zero trust culture, so that they're able to then profile everyone without any trust being favored on anyone.
That sounds an unfortunate 1984, but nevertheless, I understand the reasons why. Thank you very much indeed. So we're moving on then to the next presentation, which is focused on factors influencing smartphone end user security behavior, the case of young adults in South Africa.
Good afternoon to all delegates and presenters. My name is Raeesa Behardien from the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And today I will be presenting my study titled Factors Influencing Smartphone End User Security Behavior in the case of young adults in South Africa. This research was carried out in collaboration with Professor Erwin Brown. To run through the format of my presentation today, I will be taking you through the motivation and problem area arising around the study. I'll then move on to the various research objectives, as well as the research approach and methodology. From there, I will discuss the major outcomes and significance of my research. And finally, I'll conclude with the research conclusions and future outlook and possibilities for this topic going forward. My first topic covers the motivation and problem area. As already mentioned, the study is entitled Factors Influencing Smartphone End-User Security Behavior and focuses on the case of young adults in South Africa. Due to the improvements in processing power, mobility, and character, smartphones have increased in their popularity. These advancements bring about major changes to the computing space. There are various advantages as well as disadvantages with this progression, with one of those disadvantages being security risks. There are various security risks that arise through smartphone usage because of the large amounts of user personal data and information generated and stored on these devices, all of which require protection from security threats. This study is particularly interested in behavioral information systems that focuses on human behavior and how a person perceives the information system, in this case, smartphone security, and how the user perceives that smartphone security. It has been found that users are complacent when it comes to securing their smartphones, and that little to nothing is done to ensure the devices are secure from threats. Pure security behavior renders smartphone users vulnerable to cyber threats, crime, information privacy violations, and other issues. Investigating security behaviors allows for better understanding to be gathered around how to ensure improved security behaviors. This understanding will benefit end users of smartphones and society as a whole. Smartphone users are made up of a diverse group, and it is found that young adults are particularly intense users of smartphones for various and extensive purposes such as education, entertainment, social media engagement, and financial transactions. This slide will cover the objectives of the study. The purpose of this research is to identify the factors influencing end-user smartphone security behavior. It is an explanatory study which identifies the ways end users behave when it comes to smartphone security and what influences that behavior. The findings from this research aid the understanding of smartphone security practices among end users, and in this case, young adults in South Africa. Literature provides a broad overview of the concepts of smartphone usage and security, as well as smartphone security behavior. There are numerous models relating to behavioral information security research that have been formulated, as well as various theories that have been applied to the measurement of security behavior, awareness, and smartphone security behavior in its entirety. This study refers to a combination of the expectancy-based model and the threat-based model developed by Das and Khan, as well as aspects of the protection motivation theory presented by Sarathiel. We have opted for an integration of theories, following Das and Khan in order to provide greater explanatory power. End-user smartphone security behavior is the focal concept of the study. Behavioral intent, awareness, self-efficacy, user sophistication, cost, trust, distrust, and threat are identified in literature as the factors influencing smartphone security behavior. This diagram highlights the conceptual model adopted, as well as the hypotheses identified for this research. Hypothesis 1 implies that behavioral intent positively influences the end user's smartphone security behavior. This is because a user's behavior is determined by the actions and intentions determine the success of the smartphone security, which is dependent on the adoption of that behavior. It is expected that the user's behavioral intent concerning smartphone security will influence their actual smartphone security behavioral practices. Hypothesis 2 implies that security awareness positively influences the end user's smartphone security behavior. This highlights that smartphone information security awareness reflects the knowledge and understanding end users have about smartphone security. The majority of end users possess a low level of security awareness or knowledge, and having an understanding of smartphone security is promoted as a means of reducing security risk. Hypothesis 3 says that self-efficacy positively influences the end user's smartphone security behavior. Self-efficacy is the user's belief in their ability to achieve a goal. And in this case, self-efficacy relates to the user's belief in their ability to protect themselves from smartphone security threats. Self-efficacy has been found to be one of the strongest security behavior enablers. It is expected that a user who has a strong belief in their ability to secure their smartphone displays improved smartphone security behavior. Hypothesis 4 implies that user IT sophistication positively influences the end user smartphone security behavior. This focuses on the end user sophistication or their level of adeptness in relation to smartphones, as well as their overall perceived innovativeness with IT. And this shows to be a reliable predictor of user beliefs and actions. It is expected that users who display a higher level of sophistication would have a propensity for positive smartphone security behavior. Hypothesis 5 says that the cost of threat response negatively influences the end user's smartphone security behavior. The behavioral response to a security threat is directly linked to the user's perceived cost benefit of responding to the threat. The user will adopt countermeasures when the cost or effort of that behavior is less than the expected loss or effort of the threat. It is expected that the higher the cost of implementing smartphone security behavior, the less likely it is that the user will display that behavior. Hypothesis 6 implies that an increased level of distrust in people positively influences the end user's smartphone security behavior. Since a smartphone user is influenced by the ability to trust or have confidence in others, it is expected that those who are more trusting will display lower levels of security behaviors, as they would not necessarily expect malicious behavior from others. The reverse would also hold true. Hypothesis 7 says that threat positively influences end user smartphone security behavior, and the ability to control an information security threat or risk is expected to influence end users' behavior towards their smartphone security. The end user's understanding of the various threats or risks to their security influences their voluntary security behaviors, and perceived threats vary greatly from person to person. Depending on how seriously the user perceives the threat, they are expected to exhibit an increased or decreased level of security behavior in response to that threat. A positivist deductive research approach has been adopted for this study. Because of this, a survey in the form of an online questionnaire was used. This was the most efficient way to collect a large amount of data for a sizable sample. The research timeframe was cross-sectional, as the factors influencing smartphone security behavior of end users were observed at the point in time at which the research was being conducted. The target population of the study consisted of smartphone users who are South African. Since everyone in the population was not able to be tested, it was necessary to make use of a study sample. The primary sample of the study was made up of students from a large South African university. The choice of university students was driven by the fact that they are by and large young adults who are regular users of smartphones and exhibit varying smartphone security behaviors. Ethics approval was obtained from the university to conduct the study, and approval was obtained to send the questionnaire to a random sample of students. The questionnaire in this study makes use of a 5-point Likert scale, ranging from 1 for disagree to 5 for agree, where the participant was asked to rate statements for their opinion. The Likert scale is adopted as they are the most popular type of attitude assessment scale. For each construct in the hypothesis, a validated measuring instrument was identified in literature and, where necessary, adjusted to fit the context of end-user smartphone security. Moving on to outcomes and significance of the study, it was suggested by Okoff and Robinson that the user security awareness influences the attitude and behavior towards the information security, and that users are complacent when it comes to the smartphone security behavior. But based on the results gathered in this study, awareness is recognized as a significant influence on end-user behavior, with the hypothesis being accepted at a p-value of less than 0.05. User IT sophistication is also an influence on the end-user security behavior. Ree et al. Says that security behaviors depend on the ability of the user to perform that behavior. So based on the study conducted, user IT sophistication is recognized as a significant influence on the end user smartphone security behavior, with the hypotheses being accepted at the p-value less than 0.05. The study by Dusk and Khan showed that end users are influenced by their trust in others, and that those who are more trusting will display less secure behaviors. According to the research conducted, distrust is recognized as a significant influence on end user security behavior, with the hypotheses being accepted at a p-value of less than 0.05. This conceptual model also identified the factors of self-efficacy, cost, and threat as influences of smartphone security behavior. Previous studies stated that self-efficacy influences the user security behavior, as it explains the ability to carry out that specified behavior. Although based on the research in this study, self-efficacy is not recognized as having an impact on the factors influencing smartphone end-user security behavior, with that hypothesis being rejected at a p-value greater than 0.05. Cost is hypothesized to have an impact on user security behavior, as there's often a loss of convenience, functionality, and time taken that is used to protect against security threats. According to the research conducted in this study, cost is not the factor influencing smartphone end-user security behavior, with the tested hypothesis being rejected at a p-value of greater than 0.05. Threat has been recognized as an influence on smartphone security behavior, as it is hypothesized that the prospect of a malware attack or incident of data leakage and threat would likely evoke security behaviors from users. The conducted research shows that while the severity of the threat, as well as the type of threat, whether it be malware attack or data leakage, may influence the threat factor, the aggregated actual threat is not seen to impact the factors having an influence on smartphone end-user security behavior, with the hypothesis being rejected at a p-value of greater than 0.05. In conclusion, the purpose of this study was to identify the factors that influence end-user smartphone security behavior in the context of South Africa. The research model included inspection of the following factors influencing end-user smartphone security behavior as derived by literature, that being behavioral intent, awareness, self-efficacy, user sophistication, cost, distrust, and threat. The findings of this study show that end-user smartphone security behavior is influenced by the user's awareness of smartphone security, the user's IT sophistication, which represents their ability to protect themselves from a security threat, and lastly, the trust that the user has in society and people in general. Future research might investigate how to convert this explanatory knowledge into prescriptive knowledge by employing research approaches such as design science to build artifacts and solutions that raise awareness among smartphone users, increase levels of IT sophistication, or to sensitize young adults to being more cautious on whom to trust online. Only 3 of the factors hypothesized were confirmed as factors influencing the end-user smartphone security behavior. Here lies an opportunity for further research whether unsupported factors could be better measured and tested as influences of security behavior, as well as the identification of other factors which could act as influences to expand upon those that were identified in the study. Although demographic data had been captured for the purpose of the study, it was not used to assess links between the smartphone end-user security behavior and their demographics. Further research into this issue has the possibility of returning noteworthy results. An interesting experiment could be carried out in which the various ways in which the original 7 factors being investigated are enhanced. This could then be observed in the impact of those factors influencing smartphone end-user security behaviors. Lastly, the research could further be expanded over a larger and more representative sample of South African smartphone users to generate more diverse responses and data for analysis. It is to be expected that the larger the tested sample is, the more representative the findings would be. This research has the potential implications on both individual smartphone users and organizations, since smartphones have become integral to our lives and practice. This brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Raeesa. That was very interesting. Obviously, it would be important to look at a broader constituency, including but not limited to university students. But can you talk to us about any insights you may have captured in relation to both gender or socioeconomic differences in terms of how your catchment group responded to the questions? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. So that is an interesting question. I know I did highlight that demographics wasn't one of the influences that made it to the results, but I did capture demographic data in my analysis. And it didn't actually quite make it to the write-up, but there were, if I recall, there was a notion that says that males were perhaps, or as it was highlighted in the study, those were selected males. At the end of the day, it saw that males had an inclination of trust, whereas females leaned more towards distrust. And I suppose that's one of the reasons why we thought that demographic data would form an interesting part of a further study to say, okay, are the demographic or socioeconomic, as you've mentioned, factors, do they actually influence awareness or self-efficacy or user sophistication? But we didn't actually look into backgrounds. The demographic data that was picked up was more around age, gender, and so on. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, I think it does. I'm just highlighting that perhaps there are nuances that would be interesting to explore, because depending on the institution, you could have a broad range that's representative of society, or you could have some parts of society that are less well represented, whether it's from rural populations or whatever it might be. So I'm just highlighting it as potentially an issue to consider for the future. Jay, I can see your hand is up, so I'm not sure if your question was for Raeesa or whether it was for Sarathiel. Jay, are you able to unmute?
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to know, because of the issue of mobile users, it's an issue, because in our context is that most of the time the young ones just go on buy on phones, download software, but they don't know the dangers. But I just wanted to know the context of South Africa. Is it at the level of the schools? Is there any program to educate the children on the challenges they're facing when they're using mobile phones and so on? Is there any, looking at the school program at that level? Is there anything at that level?
Hi, Angie. Thank you for your question. So as far as I know, at the school level, there is not really anything that's in place. I know that there's a lot of emphasis perhaps in the media for children and young adults as well, to be more conscious of what they share, perhaps on social media, and the way in which they use their mobile phones. Because, you know, a child would just download any application from the various app stores. So I think that is one of the studies that I did recently. I'm not sure who it was, who the author was, but it was around how to educate or teenagers, as an example, in the way they use their mobile phones, and how to be cautious with it.
Raeesa, if you find that reference over the coming days, if you share that with me, I'd be happy to share that with Jay, because I'm sure it would be of interest.
I will do so, thank you.
That'd be great, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Raeesa? In which case, thank you very much indeed, and I look forward to your further studies. So then we're moving on to the last presentation of today from Stanford, which is focused on security concerns on social. Oh, I'm so sorry. I jumped over Thembakazi. So that's towards the cybersecurity culture framework for mobile banking in South Africa. My apologies.
Good afternoon, colleagues. It is such a great honor to be part of this conference and present my work amongst you. My name is Thembakazi Kangapi. I am an IS honors student at the University of Fort Hare in South Africa. My research interests include cybersecurity and mobile banking. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Edmore Chindenga, who is my supervisor and a co-author of this work. Our paper is titled Towards a Cybersecurity Culture Framework for Mobile Banking in South Africa. Just a brief overview on what will be covered in this presentation. Firstly, we'll cover motivation and problem area, followed by research objectives, which will then be followed by research approach and methodology, then major outcomes and results, and lastly, conclusion and outlook. Mobile banking contributes to financial inclusion for the unbanked population. Financial inclusion is said to significantly reduce poverty rates and income inequality in developing countries such as South Africa. However, such development presents the reality of cybercrime. As reported by SABRIC in 2020, mobile banking application fraud accounted for 59.7% of digital banking incidents in South Africa. And in 2021, South Africa was on the third highest in the countries with the most cybercrime victims. Thus, the growing threat of cybercrime has increased the need for cybersecurity. Cybersecurity refers to the protection of data and critical infrastructure on the internet. Despite the current cybersecurity efforts in South Africa, its implementation is immature. This study recognizes the National Cybersecurity Policy Framework and Cybercrimes Bill, which established the responsibility for incident reporting. However, there are still a high number of cybercrime rates in South Africa. Hence, this study finds it imperative that cybersecurity measures are strengthened in South Africa. Research objectives. This study conducted an extensive literature review on the following aspects: benefits of mobile banking, challenges of cybersecurity in the mobile banking sector, ways to mitigate cybersecurity in the mobile banking sector. This study is founded on the socio-technical systems theory, STS, which argues that technology should not be merely implemented on people, rather how people, technology, and processes can be jointly optimized to become more efficient. To achieve the objectives of the study, the secondary sources were used, such as electronic journal databases, such as Google Scholar, Gisto, Science Direct, IEEE Explore, books, and published dissertation. The inclusion criteria included English papers that were published within cybersecurity context in Africa and South Africa. 52 papers were initially identified, which were screened further to 44 papers. To interpret data collected in this study, thematic analysis was carried out. Findings of the study identified 4 elements that may be used to promote cybersecurity culture in mobile banking. All components of this framework are founded on the literature. The first component is collaboration. As we all know that cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility, it is important that there is collaboration amongst mobile banking cybersecurity stakeholders. These stakeholders include consumers, risk managers, IT managers, security professionals, developers, academics, government, and policy makers. Improvement requires input from all these stakeholders for a robust approach. It is worth noting, colleagues, that also end users form part of their stakeholders, and end users tend to be unpredictable. This is due to their limited knowledge of cybersecurity and cybercrimes. Thus, it is important that end users are taught on how to behave on cyberspace, and also they need to be made aware of the cyber threats and the trends that are there, so that they can be more vigilant in terms of protecting their own data while on cyberspace. The second component is monitoring and evaluation. It is important to note that not only processes must be monitored, but people as well as technology should be monitored. Monitoring and evaluation helps improve performance to achieve the optimal results. So compliance also needs to be monitored. So users as well as staff members should be monitored. Resources must also be monitored to identify gaps. Policies should also be monitored for relevance. Cyber threat trends must be monitored for mitigation, as well as cybersecurity infrastructure for weaknesses. Where gaps are identified, support should be provided, which takes us to the next component. This simply means that support is the end result of monitoring and evaluation. Support can be given in a form of cybersecurity awareness campaigns, technical support, cybersecurity budgets, as well as cybersecurity training. Where possible, rewards and incentive programs can also be given to motivate the workers that has helped safeguarding the important data and infrastructure. Policies should be in place to provide guidance, accountability, consistency, and clarity. So policies should be in place for accessibility, code of conduct, software standards, so that everyone can make sure to comply with these. Also, policies on how data is managed by processes, by storage, as well as in transit, to ensure that it is confidential, it is private, and also the integrity is always maintained. Also, there needs to be policies in terms of how to manage risks and how to assess risks for impact. It needs to be noted that this framework is overarched by STS theory. So STS theory was used in this framework for relevance. It should be noted that all these components must receive the same importance in order to be effective. This research presents several components as identified in the literature that can help boost cybersecurity culture. Findings from the study point towards increased market value for mobile banking users. This means that if this cybersecurity culture framework can be used, it will create value for mobile banking customers, which will in turn increase market value. Also, it can enhance customer satisfaction. If customers feel that they are safe, then they will be happy. Also, it points towards decline in security incidents. Thus, if this cybersecurity culture can be embraced, there can be decline in security incidents. In closing, role of mobile banking in boosting economy cannot be overstated despite the risks associated with its use. Establishing cultures that promote knowledge and awareness can mitigate some cyber risks. The proposed cybersecurity culture can increase cybersecurity awareness, protect banking infrastructure, and banking communities from cyber attacks. All proposed components should be equally considered for a comprehensive cybersecurity awareness. These are the references that were cited in this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Thembakazi. Which key stakeholder groups do you believe should lead in terms of helping establish the type of cybersecurity culture framework that you're talking about? Is it the media? Is it financial services? Is it schools? Who do you think should lead this?
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you very much. I believe that government should lead as well as the universities.
Okay, so how do you think they can operationalize that? And going back to the question that Jay was asking earlier about school interventions, do you think this should start at school level, or do you think it should start when people are joining the workforce? Where do you think it should start?
I think it should start at school level. I think now there must be new programs that are created and registered that speak specifically to cybersecurity. As we all know that now we are moving towards smart cities. So it means that now there is a need, there's a dire need for cybersecurity skills. So I believe that it should start at school level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So does anybody else have any questions or comments? In which case, thank you very much indeed. And we're moving on to what I hope is now our last presenter, which is Stanford on security concerns on social media, customer-to-customer online transactions, looking at Facebook users in Namibia.
I would like to greet you all. My name is Stanford Musarurwa from International Training College Lingua in Namibia. My research paper is entitled Security Concerns on Social Media, Customer-to-Customer Online Transactions, a case of Namibia Facebook users. Right. The motivation toward this research, we all know that when the pandemic started, there were so many technologies that emerged. One of the technology was the use of social media in the business world. So we have seen that businesses, not only businesses, but individuals, they resort to social media in order to share information and also to market products and service. And this has led to customer online transactions taking place. However, this trend, it opened security issues, security loopholes, where some users fall victim of online fraudulent and also scams, and some people also suffer financial losses. According to a research that was conducted by GSMA Alliance in 2021, that was last year, it found out that e-commerce in Africa is mostly conducted through the use of social media, as it indicated here that transactions between transactions between consumers often conducted through the use of social media networks and third-party sites. So this was one of the development that took place in Africa in e-commerce. All right, as I said earlier, these are some of the security concerns that was brought by the use of social media transactions, such as scams. The other security loophole that is in these social media online transactions is that there is no regulations or policy that governs these transactions. As a result, it is a challenge for victims to actually protected by any law, because especially in Namibia there is no law that governs these online transactions when it comes to on social media. The other security issues are social engineering. Yes, there's so much social engineering activities that take place on social on social media, where criminals try to take advantage of unaware users. Then the other issue is identity and accountability. Yes, on social media, there is no tracking of the criminals. It's difficult to hold someone accountable in a circumstance whereby there is a fraudulent activity. The other issue again is the risk of delivering, the risk of getting, or where a buyer can end up getting a malfunctioning product or counterfeit goods delivered. So these are some of the risks that are realized on social media transactions. So the research objective for this study was to identify security concerns on customer-to-customer social media transactions, and to propose social media customer-to-customer security online transaction strategic requirements. Right, to achieve these objectives, we carried out a quantitative research where data was collected from social user, from selected Facebook users in Namibia, where we use a stratified sampling strategy to collect data from 350 participants. So to do this, we targeted 11 user created marketing groups on Facebook. in Namibia. And an online questionnaire was distributed to these participants in order to analyze data. We use descriptive statistics. In regards to the outcomes and results of this study, the table shows what was found, what was discovered in this study. So we have items that are listed on the right side of the table. So in regards to the age distribution, it was found out that the majority of respondents were aged 16 to 40 years of age. So this shows that the majority of Facebook users are young people and middle-aged people. Then in regards to Facebook use, it was discovered that 83% of the respondents, they use Facebook on a daily basis. So this means that most of the respondents are regular Facebook users and they have access to products and goods that are marketed on Facebook. Then in regards to the patterns on buying of goods and products on social media, we found out that 77% usually search for goods and products on Facebook user groups. So the discovery was that the majority of the respondents regularly search for products and goods on Facebook user groups. So this shows that these participants that on these Facebook user created groups, they are solely there for the purpose of searching for goods or marketing their goods. So the other item that the patterns on purchasing and selling goods and products on social networks, we have discovered that 67% you've either bought or sold a product through Facebook. Yeah, so this actually also indicates that customer-to-customer sales through Facebook user-created groups are existing in Namibia. Regarding the knowledge of risk associated with the transacting on social media, we discovered that 90% believe of the respondents believe that there is a significant involved in social media transactions. This indicates that there is a chance that unsuspecting shoppers can fall prey to fraudulent activities of sellers or scammers. Okay, then in regards to the potential risk involved with purchasing products on goods on social networks, about 68% indicated that the most prevalent risk is monetary loss. 32% indicated that they fear buying products that are not that are counterfeit, defective, stolen, or non-existent goods. So this interprets that there is significant risk in social media transactions in Namibia, and the most prevalent risk is monetary loss. In regards to the experience of social media fraud, about 55% indicated that they have been defrauded or nearly got defrauded, or they have purchased defective goods or stolen goods. And 45 indicated that they have never defrauded in any way. But however, the results indicated that there is security risks such as fraud, online fraud in social media transactions in Namibia. Then in regards to in regards to secure online transactions on social media, 82% of the 82% of the respondents believe that that customer-to-customer social media online transactions are not safe. In particular, because there is no accountability. I think I've mentioned this, that if anything happens, it is difficult to hold someone accountable. So this shows that it's not safe to make transactions on social media. All right, so this is what we have proposed. We proposed the implementation of a mediator that will facilitate transaction between two parties, in particular the buyer and the seller. We also proposed that such a platform should have an encryption services to guarantee data and confidentiality. Sorry, to guarantee confidentiality and integrity of data. We also propose that such a platform should request authentication, should authenticate user and also request a user identity, so that it will be easy for tracking a user when there is a fraud. Then we also propose that such a platform should provide user education and awareness of the dangers and the risks that involved in social media transaction. The other strategic requirement that we propose is the implementation of anti-fraud monitoring on customer-to-customer systems, so as to detect any fraudulent activity. Then we also propose the integrating zero trust concept into the transaction system. Finally, and very important, we propose that countries such as Namibia should actually come up with a cybercrime law and regulations that would aid in protecting and resolving incidents on social media transactions. So in conclusion, I can say in Namibia, social media transactions face security challenges such as scams, imposter accounts, social engineering, and online fraudsters. So to keep this and to minimize these security issues, we proposed the implementation of a third-party platform that would improve security. We also propose that future studies should focus on embedding threat intelligence software and automation in social media online transaction systems. Thank you. I've come to the end of my presentation. And this is now time for questions and comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Stanford. I have one overriding question, and please forgive me, okay? If 90% of your respondents believes there's a significant risk in social media transactions, 82% believe customer-to-customer social media transactions are not safe, and 55% have been cheated one way or the other, why on earth do they still do it? Do you have any insight on that? Thank you.
Thank you for this platform. Mostly people, they actually think like in Namibia, actually, I've also maybe visited some of these groups that advertise their products and services. You would see like, I think in Namibia, everything now can be sold on social media, even cars, even houses. It's like the transactions actually, you see like they are based on negotiations, meaning to say, some they believe like you can bargain there on social media because you can actually negotiate the price. So you see that people will always look for on social media when they're actually looking for products, right? One of the things also that I've discovered is that it has become a trend that when someone is looking for a product, he would actually want to compare what is actually maybe, especially maybe in the shop there and the other prices that actually what maybe offered on social media for a certain product or even for a service.
So from your perspective, it's primarily about saving money, is it?
It's a bargain, and you would see like many buyers, and so in Namibia, like it become a platform whereby many buyers and sellers would meet and actually, transact their products.
Okay, I find it bizarre, but forgive me. Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Stanford? Don't get me wrong, I think it's very interesting research. I just find, based on the findings, I don't understand the behavior. That's where I'm coming from.
Yes, I understand. Even myself, I would find it actually very, it's surprising now, like the trend now that is actually coming, because as I said, you would find out like on social media, it becomes a norm. Like even if you ask like for a friend, I'm looking for maybe for a house to rent, they will actually say, if you looked on Facebook first, you see, and on Facebook, it has become a platform where everybody runs there. It's like many sellers would meet more buyers there. You see, like it's about the reach to the customer. I think.
Okay.
So. Yes.
No, I understand. All right, Katama, you wanted to ask a question or made a comment?
Yes, Kutoma is the name. So I was just wondering, I mean, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I'm just wondering how the trust is expected to be developed between the two parties, particularly when I think you alluded to the fact that the mediator ought to be someone they possibly know, but forgive me if I misunderstood you on that part. So yeah, I'm just curious in terms of how, this whole thing is going to work out between, with regards to trust and the mediators the mediator or mediators that are supposed to be used between the two parties.
Okay, thank you so much for your question. Right. Firstly, I think it's not possible for us to actually deny that, Facebook, like many people, especially in Namibia, are actually flocking to Facebook, to actually either sell a product or maybe even buy some products. Because there, as I said, it's like the market is huge, right? Then the issue of a mediator, as I said, is something that maybe the regulators cannot ignore that this thing is actually taking place. So I would actually think that it's something that should be maybe the government give attention to, so that a platform would be created. Reason being that why would actually maybe propose a platform? Because you see, many of the, like if you look on e-learning, like the traditional way of actually buying and selling online, it's whereby it's actually facilitated through maybe these banks. But in this case now, we are looking on a situation whereby some users, they do not even have what bank accounts. And we're also looking in a situation whereby if there's fraud, because there is fraud that is taking place, it happens. Yes, people, they don't have trust, but it happens, right? Then in such a way, if on a mediator, the mediator will be, let me say, it can be a platform that is actually it's like a campaign that can be given out, that, we have a platform that can actually facilitate this transaction in a way that is safe with a reduced risk, whereby everybody who wants to participate in this transaction, whether you are a seller or a buyer, you are supposed to register, so that your identity is also known in case of any fraud. So in this case, we are looking also in case of accountability. Who is accountable? Right now, if I make a transaction with someone whom I don't know on Facebook, it's very difficult for me, if anything happens, to go to a police and I open a case. It's very difficult. That would be very difficult, because they will not be able to actually identify the person.
Okay, yeah, that's quite interesting. But then I'm just wondering, what about, because fraud can take many forms, right? So even even between the two parties. So yes. How does the mediator then ensure that fraud will not be taking place by either party?
Okay. Firstly, maybe I can give an example. For example, if you maybe the seller or maybe the buyer get to maybe receive a counterfeit good or maybe goods that are not working, it would be actually easy to actually identify the seller and actually request what maybe the issue to be resolved. Because as it stands, if it happens that you buy something from through Facebook, you won't be able to even report anything or recover your product or your money. That would be impossible, or that would be very difficult as it stands.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that comment. Just the last thing I would like to raise, since it's topical at the moment, is the issue of a relatively high percentage of false accounts on Twitter has come up recently in the context of the Elon Musk takeover. So that obviously raises the potential risks of other social media platforms having similar issues. What are the consequences of that, and what's the likelihood that that would affect the Namibian community of these groups that have been set up to buy and sell from one another?
I think maybe with the high percent of actually, let me say, social like Facebook users, especially those who actually transact, it will actually maybe somehow reduce their participation. Yes, that's what I believe.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments on Stanford's presentation, or indeed anything else that's been discussed today? Please raise your hand if you'd like to be called on. In great case, thank you all very much for your active participation today. And now we're going to give you a brief overview of some of the topics that we're going to be discussing tomorrow. So the majority of presentations tomorrow are focused on e-health, and our first session in the morning, which starts at 9:40 South African time, is around health enablers, priority factors in the e-health policies, strategic partnerships in e-health, and community practice. We also have a plenary session talking about the SAIS2 program, which has been supporting innovation and entrepreneurship in Southern Africa. So we look forward to your active participation again in the morning. Gurmila Mahakov and Slán Gafol.